Welcome to the Day of Friday. My name is Michael Schimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We run this session here every Friday to allow you, the audience, to ask questions about Data Vault, data mining, any data-driven applications, cloud computing, MPP stuff, and so on. The session is every Friday, 11 o'clock Central European Standard Time. You can join in, ask questions here in a live stream if you want. You can use the chat to type in your question. You can use the Q&A function here in the client. You can raise your virtual hand. I give you a voice, and I'll show you a link to a form after today's session where you can also submit your questions essentially, and then give me some time to prepare one of the slides essentially for the session. If you receive multiple questions, I would be cherry picking. We started running low on questions, so if you have any questions, just shoot them. It's perfect. Use the form and just submit your questions essentially. Good answer should be around roughly 10 minutes or something to be answered, so that's a good stream essentially. And if there would be no questions at all, if we ever hit this point again, I would have to talk about the cluster. I haven't done much, so help me out here, guys. All right, so we received a question here from one of the clients. Let me just show you the slide. And this is about, let me just go through the question here, first of all, then we talk about what my impression is. So I have a table project, a table tasks with a foreign key to projects, and a table actions with a foreign key to tasks. And I'll show you a table. Well, let me just quickly show you a table. So that's my understanding. So we got this table here where you have references to those other tables, projects, tasks, entities, and so on. All right. Ultimately, I want to create a project dimension and a task dimension, the latter with an additional attribute representing the latest action for the task. The simplest approach will be a multi-actor satellite based on sets and then selecting the latest action within each set. However, our source is CDC-like, so keep that in mind. So capturing sets is not straightforward. Additionally, an approach by set would generate too many records as new actions are added daily. Instead, I consider a multi-active satellite based on a multi-active attribute, ID of the action. So the idea is this. We have this table here, and I have to, oh, yeah, Peggy, I give you a voice. 1 second, because it's Peggy's question here.
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
Okay. The example you're showing is from another question.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Another table.
Okay, okay, so
questions.
Okay, perfect. I saw two lines or two form submits, and I thought they belong together. But here's the thing. So nevertheless, so you have essentially an actions table with is related to tasks, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so that's okay. That's fine. So the actions, are they like events? Could you also say, well, the events, or they happen again and again on those tasks?
It's like events, but the problem is that I don't trust the source, so I have to historize them.
Yeah, which is fine. Yep. Right. Yeah. So the thing is this: there's this non-historized link, right? And don't get confused. The non-historized link can also capture history. It's just like the term non-historized comes from the fact that you have a stream of events or transactions, something like that. While with let's say master data, you keep track of changes to the master data all the time. So it's not like a stream of events. It's more like a object that gets modified all the time. That's a bit different. That's where the term non-historized comes from. But we can capture changes on your facts or your transactions, for example. So let's don't get confused on that. So okay, so for the project table, I believe it's relatively straightforward. You have a project hub, and you have a project satellite where you capture changes on the project. That's your master data essentially. And then for the tasks, we could do the same. So we could have a hub for tasks and a satellite describing the task over time. You can modify it once in a while. That's relatively straightforward. Your problem is the actions, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Because at the end, I need the latest action by task.
Yeah, we'll figure that out later. Okay. That's for me, that's more the information delivery side. We can talk about that one. We should talk about that one. So what I would do is this: if the action is like an event on the task, if you, let's say, do something on the task, in this case, I tend to use a non-historized link. And especially because you're dealing with CDC data here. What I would do is when records come in, let's make it simple. Let's ignore CDC for now. So actions come in, and I'm adding an entry to the non-hysterized link for every action that comes in. So I stick to the granularity of the incoming actions essentially. And the non-hysterized link at least refers to the hub tasks. There is no hub actions for this in this regard. I would just have the action, the ID of the action. That's all essentially payload of the non-hysterized link, most probably.
Yeah.
Haven't seen your model though. Now with CDC, the thing is this. It's relatively simple and straightforward now. Once you use a non-hysterized link. With the non-hysterized link, we can capture changes. The way it works is that we use what we call technical counter transactions. The idea is simple. You have, let's say, for when there's an update in the source system, an update, technically speaking, is very similar to a deletion of the old version and an insert of the new version. So what we do is we capture every insert as a new record to the non-hysterized link. Every deletion we capture as a counter transaction. We essentially negate the measure value. So you have to have essentially the same hub references and the negative measure value. And every update we capture as two records. One as a negative value, the technical counter transaction, and one as a new insert. That way we capture all these changes, and this pattern, and we discussed this multiple times already in the sessions here today. So there's a few recordings actually on technical counter transactions on YouTube. What we do is for the CDC data, that's what it is. So you have inserts, you have updates, you have deletes, and you capture one record in a target for every insert, one record in a target for every deletion, but it's the opposite value, right? And then to make sure when you aggregate the data, you want to cancel the first record, the initial insert, out with the second insert. That's a negated value essentially. And when you aggregate them, you get a zero value. And then for every update coming from the source of CDC, you enter two rows. One to get the old version, the current version of the record out of the system, and one to get the new record or a new version into the system, into the non-hysterized link. And that's how we would capture CDC data for these non-hysterized links essentially. There will be the, and then it's relatively straightforward. It's super fast. The volume is okay because you don't have to deal with, like in multi-active satellite, you quickly have to deal with sets of data, right? What's the whole old set? And there's some tricks how we can deal with this in CDC as well. Like what you could do is when you only get a delta coming from the source, but you have to have the set. You get the latest version from the target, the latest group from the target, apply the delta, and that modified set you then insert into the target again. But then you have a lot of volume you add, right? So when you just apply CDC data, one for every insert and delete and two records for every update, that's relatively low volume essentially. So that's how I would capture essentially your actions here in this case. One hub for, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, it's the same as the multi-active satellite, but not with a set, but with the multi-active attribute.
It's very similar. It's just the granularity sticks to the incoming data set. You don't have to build sets essentially, where the set becomes bigger and bigger over time, right?
No, but it's easier because that's just copying the records from the CDC source.
Yeah. Yep.
With the link, I have to create extra records. Check if it's an update, check.
Yeah, okay, so I get it. The only thing is, how do you later use it? Because in the end, when you want to retrieve the data,
yeah,
I can, based on the non-hysterized link, I have the latest record in the link is the latest action applied to the task.
The latest record in the link is the latest action.
Yeah, because when you do a insert of a new action, you get a new record with a new CDC date and load date essentially inserted into the non-hysterized link. So for every combination of tasks, for every task, you have the highest. I would use the most.
Can you show it with an example?
I don't have an example, to be honest.
Just on the fly, like we have a task with action 1, and then.
So we have a hub for tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have this non-hysterized link essentially. Actions. where we refer this to essentially, right? And so when the first record comes in, the first insert, you have a first, let's say task A, right? So with task A, we have action. Let's do, I was thinking of X or something. And then
date 1.
Yeah, some dates most probably. So let's do day 1. That's the LDTS. And then you most probably have some. Do you have an action timestamp, like a modified date or create a timestamp for the action?
Yes, an action timestamp and a type of action.
Yeah, let's call it business date or something. That's the timeline from the source essentially. And the load date would be close to the CDC time date actually.
Yes.
So in your CDC package, you have a timestamp, and I would most probably use that one.
Yes, yes, it's the same.
Yeah, and then so that's my starting point. So, and that's, let's say, it's also day 1. So that's the first record. That's my latest record based on both timelines for now. And then there's a new action, a second action coming in. Let's start with that. So for A, I get Z, whatever, on day 2. And this business date is also day 2. And then there's an update on the action. So, right, they update the action essentially in CDC system, and you get a update notification from CDC, which means we turn this into 2 rows. We get rid of the old transaction and into the new transaction, which means that on day 3, for A, X, that's my action that I'm updating essentially. Day 3 is the load date, but day 1, the business date hasn't changed. They just modified. Well, they could also modify the business date, in all honesty.
Yes.
And then we have what we call either you have some measures, it's one thing, but let's say you have some measure value here, The problem is, if you had, let's say, $5 here and some values here, I don't know, 7, and this changed now, they updated the value here from 5 to 10, or from 5 to 6, let's say. You could just insert the delta 1, but again, I would also always get rid of the old value and into the new value. So I'm negating the 5 values, the $5 here, or €5. And I have a counter column, as we call it. And this counter column says 1 if the record comes originally from the source, like those 2, and -1, not 0, -1 if it's a technical counter transaction. So this one here negates the original value, this one here. And then so that's the deletion part of your update. And then I'm inserting the new version of the row. And that's A, X, day 3, day 1. And I said it goes to 6. And that's the new value. If you aggregate this data, you essentially get for the X action, you get the current value, which is 6, essentially, when you aggregate this, right? And the counter column says, if you aggregate the counter column, it gives you the number of transactions behind all your records. So when you aggregate this, 1 minus 1, 1, you get 1 action behind all those records, essentially. That's how I would capture this. And now, based on when you aggregate the data, if you go for the load date, essentially, the latest load date gives you the latest version of each action, essentially. Was it per? You want the latest action or the latest version of every action?
The latest action. So okay. On day 1, normally the latest. On day 1, the latest action is X. On day 2, the latest action is Z. And on day 3, the latest action is also Z.
Yep. Okay.
So how do I arrive?
For that, you have the business date timeline then. So the business timeline gives you the indicator when the action was applied from a business perspective. And then they modified the first action X, but they kept the business timeline. If they don't modify the business timeline, let's say to day 3 or something, Z remains the latest one. And I would use a window function or some window function essentially to get this data out. So you essentially per group, per task A, you apply window function, order it by the business timeline and the latest action. That's what you're extracting from here. I'm not sure if the setup would be more efficient, to be honest.
Because what I was thinking, what I was proposing was the multi-active satellite, but not with sets, but with a dependent child, so with the action ID. And then on top of it, create sort of pit. Maybe I cannot name it pit. And then I can recreate the sets by date. And then it's easy. Then I just have to take the latest one.
Yeah, you could create. So first of all, I don't trust the source system. I would not use the ID that you had for the action as the multi.
It's a primary key, so normally there's no problem.
Okay, so I'm still a fan of adding this ID as a payload of satellite and then have a subsequence from staging. That's what I'm using as the multi-active attribute in the raw data vault, because that's under my control. So that's the idea. There's nothing against that using a PRT table to point to the delta you want to refer to, because you also want to have a task dimension with the latest action, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, I would, if you want to follow this pattern, you would create a pit table on the task hub, and that would involve only the satellites attached to the task hub, which is the task satellite, but also your action satellite. And then you essentially have a double column for the delta that you want to activate in dimension. Would be also a sufficient design. The advantage of that design is that you have a faster information delivery. That's all. That's true.
But I cannot do it in one step. I first have to create a pit on the actions, because you will have multiple rows, the sets by task. And then when I have only one record by task with the latest action, then I can create a pit with as a parent a task to add information of the satellite task and information of the pit with the latest action.
I'm not getting why can't you add the latest? Why can't you do this in one row, in one go?
Because with the pit table, I first recreate the sets of actions by load date. I will have multiple records actions by task by load date.
Yeah, you have to load the satellite first, and then you apply essentially the same pattern, the window function, to identify the latest row for your parent, for your task. You identify the latest action based on the...
Yes, and then I can create a pit based on those two, the satellite of the task and the calculated satellite was based on that non-historized link.
Yeah, what you do is if you go for the satellite pattern, you would use the same query essentially on the satellite when loading the pit table, and that's what we call a business pit or a T-pit or whatever, where you apply some business logic in the loading process for the pit table, which is fine actually. And that's the selection of delta. That's essentially your business logic, which delta you want to activate. So and what I would do is this. You have one pit, which is fully based on technical aspects on the load date. That's one pit. And then you have a second pit for your calculation for the delta. What we do is we partition one table. So we have only one pit table with a partition identifier, let's say type code or something. And this type code indicates either a standard pit table, PIT, or T-pit or whatever you want to call it. Another type code for the other pit table, but you only have one pit table for one table for all your pit partitions, essentially, for different perspectives. That's what I would recommend. But I believe the query pattern would be more or less the same as with my non-historized linked table, essentially. Yeah. More or less the same pattern. The window function, ordered by the, group it by the task, ordered by the business timeline, and get the latest record based on the business timeline. That's your latest action, essentially. If it's not deleted, though. You have to filter for non-deleted records as well.
Yeah.
But that's a pattern, essentially.
Okay.
So I have figured out how to. Let me just go back. I figured how the graph fits into your second question then, because I didn't see any question on the graph on a diagram, essentially. Well, sorry, it's in the PDF. Yeah, okay, got it. Okay, so I'll take a look at this. I removed this second slide from the slide deck and from this recording. And then this was my initial idea, so let's skip that one as well. Okay, let's skip this one. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I messed up the questions. Okay, cool. All right. So if you have a question like this, use this form here behind this URL, sfr.ee/dbfriday. That's where you can submit your questions. Also, check out our other webinars on DBT and Warescape. That's where you'll find at scalefree.to/webinars. And if you have a more urgent question which you can't answer, or where you don't want to wait until next Friday to be answered, then go for the Data Innovators Exchange, which is a forum-style community where you can sign up for free. It's all for free, and you can essentially ask questions in the forum, and they will jump on your questions essentially as well. Cool. Thanks for joining. Thanks, Peggy, for helping me out here with my questions. And see you next week, hopefully.
Yeah. Thank
you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice weekend.